And we are live. Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I'm Pastor Vince Revo here at Man After God. Welcome to Revolutionary Leaders, where we interview leaders from around the world, especially those in ministry. And today we have a very special guest, someone who is very near and dear to me. He has been serving in ministry as a volunteer and then later as a full-time pastor for the past, believe it or not, 15 years. And for pastors who have been serving for that long, generally aren't as young as he is, but you'll get to see his heart for God in a little bit. Pastor Mark graduated from King's College in New York City, where I also studied, and he studied theology at the Asian Theological Seminary. He was the head of the discipleship program at Messiah College, Philippines for 9 years. And for the past 7 years, he has been serving in the Philippines as chaplain at the Green Hills Christian Fellowship International Christian School. And not only that, but he's been a good and dear friend. We still connect even to this day, even though we are bodies of water apart. He has the biggest heart in the world. So without further ado, I know we will learn so much from this pastor and this revolutionary leader. Let's welcome in Pastor Mark Del Rosario. I just did the clap thing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so blessed to be able to do this as well. You know, I always learn so much from you, and I'm always so encouraged every time I talk to you. You have this perfect backdrop there. Can you go into what those are and what you use them for? I know you're the chaplain there, so you're leading a lot of kids, you're teaching a lot of kids, and I guess some are coming in and sharing their thoughts with you and some concerns with you. And what do you do with some of those items at the back there?
Yeah. Like you shared, I'm a chaplain over here. So there are times where students will come in and they'll want to ask questions about the Bible or they need counseling. So made my office be a little more welcoming. We have a whole bunch of Funko Pops. My Funko Pop collection is over here. That's half of them.
That's half of them. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
There's another half.
And then I have a few pictures at the back of some movies I really like. So there's The Little Prince, there's Cars 3, I'm not sure if you can see, and then there's The Iron Giant.
Yeah.
So what I usually use these
Nice.
for is when students come in, sometimes they have questions, and what I find is I need to make the Bible really relevant to them. So usually I will use like a Funko Pop character or a movie as a jumping off point to help them to see that what I'm saying actually isn't so far removed, because sometimes when they jump in with a Bible verse right away, it's like, okay, well, that's the chaplet. He's speaking about from the Bible. But then I show them, hey, it actually connects. So, like, for example, Iron Giant, one of my favorite ones. I'm actually blocking it right now. There, the Iron Giant. Iron Giant, one of my favorite parts in it is when the main character tells the Iron Giant, you are who you choose to be. So you have to choose. And I tell the students sometimes when they're struggling figuring out who they are, I tell them, in the Iron Giant, they said that. And in the Bible, it tells us, are you going to choose? And I tell them how in the book of Joshua in the Bible, Joshua says, today you need to choose who you will follow. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So moments like that are really great when I can get something that they know and bring the Bible into it and show them how a biblical truth through those. So God has been good allowing me to do that. So yeah, that's what the background is for. And I have a mini Devo actually for every Funko Pop, which we have no time for.
No way. Oh, that is cool.
Yeah, that's how I determine what pops to buy.
Okay.
Can I give a Devo from this or not?
That's awesome. Oh my goodness. You're going to have to write a book one day with all those Devos there. So yeah, well, one of the questions that I really want to ask you is, you've been doing this for a long time. You've been in ministry a very long time. A lot of people your age have not been in ministry that long. You've been faithfully serving, you've endured, you've persevered. We know that ministry can be grueling at times. It can be very challenging. And a lot end up back in the marketplace or back to their 9 to 5, or, I know, I meet so many people who are like, oh yeah, I was a former pastor, or I was a former minister, or so on and so forth. I want to ask, what inspired you to really get into leadership? Was it an accident? Was somebody push you? You get inspired one day? Was there a particular moment when you felt called, when you knew, hey, I could be in a position of influence, of servant leadership in the body? How has your journey been about that? How did it start, and how has it transformed you, those that you lead?
I really like this question because actually what I was thinking about, as you're just asking now, it's like, oh, how can I respond to that? But what God reminded me right now is how He used others to inspire me to want to be in leadership. So actually, I was thinking of the youth pastor of our church when I was in high school. He actually just turned 60. So that's why I thought of that. You posted online. He turned 60 years old. But when I was in
Wow.
high school and he was the youth pastor, he knew I was homeschooled. So I was homeschooled growing up. I went to college. College was my first traditional schooling experience. But because I was homeschooled, our
Oh,
youth pastor knew I was available all the time. So he would call
right.
me up and he would say, hey, I'm doing visitation. I'm going to go visit some of the other youth in their
Mm,
schools. Do you want to come along? And I was like,
mm,
sure. So I went along with him and I started to realize that being a pastor is more than just speaking in the front, but it's about really
yes.
inspiring people, encouraging them. So I remember he coordinated with the school of one of the youth leaders. And we showed up at the school, went into the classroom and decorated it and did like a surprise birthday for the
Oh,
youth
okay.
leader. And it was so nice. And
Nice.
I was like, it's so cool. Like that we can do this. Like it's one of those things like we're allowed to do this. We're allowed to like encourage people. And this whole new look of like what ministry is. And then later on when I
Mm,
got older, I remember when I was in college, there was a staff at the college I went to, and I was asking him one time, what is your role in our college? Because I was noticing he's always talking to students, and he said his role essentially was he was the representative of the students in the
mm,
school, like as staff. So his job was to talk to us, find out how we're doing, what are we worried about, what are we encouraged with, what do we like about the college. And that also got me to see the importance of relationships, that
yes.
a leader really knows people. There's one time I remember I was so discouraged in college because I was leading worship. Every Monday night, I would lead worship on the rooftop of our building in New York City. So it was absolutely wonderful.
Oh,
Empire State
cool.
Building in the background. It was great.
No way.
Stuff happened. And I mean, people got busy and the
Mm,
numbers of people started to drop from like 20
mm.
to like two regular people. It's like two or three of us regularly, but we used to be
Oh,
20
wow.
plus. So it was like, yeah. And then like the snow. And I was like, this is a terrible idea. But then I talked to him, the staff at the college, and he's telling me, he pointed out to me that happened was there were other worship groups starting in the school also. And he said, Mark, you inspired other
Okay.
people to see that they can start worship groups. The goal isn't
Wow.
for you to be the only worship group in the school, but to have other people be leading worship on different days. So he said, realize what God is
Wow.
doing through you.
That's a great
Yeah.
perspective. You almost you triggered it. You ignited others to start their own.
Yeah. So that was a wake up call also.
Wow.
And I don't know, I love sharing about how other people really did this. So specifically, how I got really woken up of what ministry is and really wanting to get involved in being a pastor is my discipler in college. Right before I graduated, we had coffee, which
Mm,
was very normal, I guess. We had coffee, but then
yeah.
he asked me, he said, because he's asking me, what do you want to do when you graduate? So I
Mm,
was already 21 at that time. And he said, what do you want to do when you graduate, Mark? And I said, I want to be a pastor. And
oh,
he
wow.
said, that's great, Mark. Why do you want to be a pastor? And I said, so I can preach God's word to others and lead them to Christ. And him being my disciple knew, Mark, that's a rehearsed answer. Why do you want to be a pastor? And he asked
Mm,
me several times. And just like Jesus asking Peter many times about why do you love me?
wow.
I got hurt after all. I was like, why do you keep asking me this question? And he pointed out to me, Mark, until you realize that being a pastor is who you are, who God called you
Mm,
to be, and until you realize that being a pastor is not a job, but it's who God made you to be. That you can
wow.
serve and lead other people to Christ without the position, then you
Mm,
shouldn't be a pastor yet. So I held off on
wow.
that for a long time until finally God told me it's time to talk to the church and say you're ready to be a pastor. And God really broke me a lot, humbled me a lot, and shaped me a lot. But I remember that
Mm,
was a very hard conversation to hear. That like you need to look beyond pastor being a job, but it's who
mhm.
you are. Like
Wow.
you're going to be doing this even if you don't have that job. So
Right.
that's That's what's there. In terms of specifically how it's been transformative to me and the congregation or the students I'm around, or even just the people I encounter as a pastor. There are two people in the Bible that really have shaped me in terms of how I do ministry. So one of them is Nehemiah. Before I graduated college, I was deciding, do I stay in the States? Do I stay in America, or do I move back here to the Philippines? And I read the story of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah, it says in the Bible, his heart broke when he heard that the walls of Jerusalem were broken. Something that struck me was Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the king. He had it made. It was easy, and his life was easy, and yet his heart broke. And I felt that God told me, Mark, does your heart break for the Philippines? And
Wow.
that really hit me. It was like, that's right. Does my heart break for my country, that God allowed me to be able to experience all these experiences in the States, and now I can bring that back. So that's what God keeps putting on my heart, and I keep asking myself, does my heart break for the people around me, for my country? Do I care about what's happening? And then the
Wow.
other person in the Bible I love is Barnabas. So Barnabas, he's always like the side character to Paul. But
Yeah.
Barnabas, his name means son of encouragement.
Hmm.
And I love it because he's not the driver for the ministry. Paul is usually the one, but Barnabas is the one who believed in Paul and
Yes.
allowed and introduced Paul to ministry, and they built him up so he could be able to do ministry the way he did. And Barnabas
Yeah.
was always the encourager, the backup, the support. And that really has helped shape me a lot in terms of how I interact with the people I serve here, the people I minister to. Is, am I being a son of encouragement? Am I encouraging other
Mm.
people? Am I going to not just the hurting, but even the people who may surpass me in ministry, and realize,
Mm.
like, am I investing in them? There's a pastor we have here in church. I remember before he came on as pastor, he approached me, was like, there's a burden on his heart. And I really felt like Barnabas in that moment of like, I need to invest in him so
Mm.
that he will surpass me one day as pastor. And I need to do that. So those two, Barnabas, Nehemiah, really helped shape me in terms of how I do ministry and how I do leadership.
That's
Yeah.
incredible because I remember that Nehemiah story. Actually, you shared that with me way back 10 years ago. And I remember you telling me that, and also reflecting on myself, going, what breaks me? What is so heavy on my heart? What does my heart break for? And just kind of following that. And there's a reason. Maybe someone's watching this or listening to this right now, and something is on their heart. There's a burden there, and maybe that's where God wants you to move towards fixing whatever it is that you're seeing, or being a solution to a problem that you see that maybe isn't being addressed in the church or outside of the church, or wherever you're placed. And so that's very inspiring, and to connect it to that. And you're right, yeah, he had it made, but it was just who he was, right? It wasn't anybody kind of pushing him. It was just something internal going, hey, this is what needs to be done for God. So a lot of things are happening right now, especially in the church world, as here in Christendom, on the, in Canada, in the US, things are moving so fast. They're moving so many changes are happening, especially with what happened with COVID. A lot of churches had to adapt and switch and really find their grounding. And in a rapidly changing environment, especially not just in the world, but in Christendom, how do you see the role of the church shifting with that? And what are some innovative approaches that can be used, you think, to engage with the community?
I remember when COVID hit. It was so funny. It happened 1 week before we were supposed to go on a retreat where we were gonna take the grade 6 students out on like a retreat, spiritual retreat, and do all this ministry there. And a week before, the government announced, all right, we're going to do 1 week, everyone go home from school, and it'll be 1 week off. We'll wait for COVID to blow over. Then 1 week became 2 weeks, became months, several years. During that time of lockdown, I know in other parts of the world, lockdown, the idea of like you had to stay home, those some countries it was like 2 weeks, other countries it was months, for us it was years.
Yeah.
But during that time, there's one moment I was preaching on Zoom to all the students. It was a chapel. And I realized I'm preaching to a camera. Like, I'm not even looking at their faces because obviously the cameras are all off. But I can't even look at their faces because then you're not making eye contact. So I'm looking at a camera and I'm preaching. And I'm like, what am I doing? What does this mean to be a pastor in this moment? I have no congregation around me. I used to think like events is how you reach out. That's how you engage with your community. Let's do an event. Let's do a film showing. Let's have food or like that. But that's like not what's happening. And I know a lot of us started to shift during COVID time of like, we're going to do lots of online ministry, which makes sense. But then something that really hit me was, what does it mean to be a pastor? And what I realized was we need to connect with people. So I know we talk about innovative as like, okay, what are you, usually when we say church is being innovative, we think like, okay, what are you doing with technology? Are you using AI and stuff? Are you using like more graphics and what are you doing? But for me, I'm realizing more and more the innovative approach to reaching the community is intentionally building relationships. Like when we do these things on YouTube, it's great that we can reach hundreds, thousands of people, and it's forever there online. Like people can always reach it. You can watch sermons from 5 years ago, from 2 years ago, and you can learn from it and be blessed by it. Something we need to do is to actually engage with people and have that relationship. I remember the first time after lockdown kind of ended and I had coffee with one of my other pastors here in the church. And it was so different. Like we didn't know how to talk to each other anymore. Because right, because over here, like when we do Zoom or we do video calls, we take turns, right? It's like, okay, I'll stop talking and then you talk. So we realized we couldn't have an organic wait patiently. Yeah, like we had this quiet. It's like
myself now. Do I?
yeah, right. Like the unmute, but you do. But there's that importance, I think, of building relationships, and more what I'm seeing is even among from not just students, but even parents, young adults. We long to connect with people, having that real connection where we can open up, even uncensored. More and more online, we're censoring ourselves in terms of like, I need to make sure I share things clearly. I don't want to be misunderstood. We're very careful. And we need to have real relationships where we can be open, we can say things, we can open up about our struggles and know it's okay. And providing that safe space as Christians for one another. I think that's something that as a church we've been really trying to do is pushing each other to say life on life, as we say, like you engage in life with the other person, not just as a discipleship meeting, not just as a church service, but what do you do outside of that church to really show that your love for God is a love for them also.
Wow. Yeah, that's something that, I was talking with Pastor Prudy last week, and we were talking about this same question. And one of the things that he said was innovate, making relationships with people. And I think that's a lot of us came out of COVID, not only socially awkward, but also really trying to figure out, hey, how do we really connect? Because in that period, I think humanity discovered, if they didn't already know it, and what the Christian community already knew, is that we're really not made to be in isolation, right? We're not created for that. We're created for fellowship. And even, that period of being apart for so long, coming back together, you would kind of see people a little bit triggered more easily. And so you notice people honking a little bit more road rage, at least on this end. You see people just losing it in the groceries and just, because there was that isolation and not having that time to deal with people. So, you deal with a lot of younger people, right? And so how do you deal with different people in situations of conflict? How are you the mediator, right? How do you handle different personalities, whether it's within the church body or within the school, or within friends? How do you deal with that?
That's a good question. What I find is listening a lot first and allowing them to be the ones to open up when they're ready. Because I guess there's one time I met up with someone who was going through some issues with other people, and they wanted to meet. I said, okay, let's meet up. So I met up, was ready to like, okay, let's talk about it. I mean, that's just how some of us are wired of like, let's find a solution already. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, what do they say? What can like that? And then during our time, we were eating out. Filipino thing, we always have food. We were eating out. We talked about the issue for like 5 minutes, and then they changed the topic and just talked about life and about
Mm,
movies and TV shows. I was trying to think like, wait, is this a part of me wants to say this is becoming a waste of time. We didn't come here to talk about movies. But then I
let's fix
realized
this.
partially like, yeah, like I need to be there for them. There's a trust that has
Mm,
to be built. And then wasn't
mm,
until the third time we met up, like a month
mm,
later, that they opened up more about what was causing the issue with the other people.
mhm.
So it's
Interesting.
like, yeah, and I mean that this was someone young. So it's like oftentimes like, well, that's a younger person. They're like that. But I think it applies to all of us. Because how many times do
Mhm,
we do that where we want to open up, but we're afraid to, and we're checking, can I trust this person still?
mm,
So I feel like this one thing I had to see with all the different ages because I talked to grade schoolers, I talked to high schoolers, parents, teachers, young adults, seniors, and sometimes it's just listening and then creating that space where they can open up and talk and asking them like, how are you, and then pausing and not like jumping to the next thing. Yeah, there's just one time recently I went into one of our rooms. I normally go into one of our rooms here in the church on Sundays to get coffee, and there's always someone there in the room who's like waiting to serve. If like new people come in, new people visit the church, they're there. So normally I go there and get coffee because we have really good coffee in our in our welcome center. But that day I showed up not gonna get coffee because I was trying to get off caffeine, and I was like, I have to stop.
mm.
Actually, it's your fault. You brought that up to me one time. You're like, you should.
Yeah, we talked.
Okay, gotta just chill and not get caffeine. But I went in the room anyway, talked to the volunteers there, and they asked me after talking for like 15 minutes. They're like, "Oh,
Mm,
did you come in here for coffee?" And I said, "No, I just came in here to check on you." It was so nice that I said
mm.
that truthfully. Like I really came in to check on them and listen. And they did
Ah,
mention some struggles they were having with others. And I think it's because we show them that we're there to listen. I think that is really important for us as pastors, as leaders, is are we here to serve?
yeah. Be quick to listen. It's easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
Especially in a day and age when we get to talk anytime we want and share our thoughts anytime we want on any platform, everywhere. And
Yeah.
to be able to stop that and go, okay, let me listen to this person right now, because sometimes that's all they need. Where,
Mhm.
I remember somebody calling me for advice, and they said, can we talk? Can I just ask you your advice on this? And I said, sure. And I knew what the topic was. So I thought, okay, well, this is what I'm going to tell them. Sometimes from an outside point of view, you can see the solution already, right? You already know, like, oh, if you just do this and A, B, and C, you're going to be fine. And so we got on the phone, and they just started talking and talking and talking. And I was just listening, and kind of in that moment asking God, okay, should I tell them the solution now? Okay, should I give them the steps now? And it was still, I felt like the Holy Spirit was just keeping me quiet in that moment, just to nod and to listen. And and then after, I don't know, it must have been 15, 20 minutes or so, finally there was a pause, and they said, oh, well, thanks so much. That was really helpful. And I didn't really say much, right? I just kind
Yeah.
of listened. I
Mhm.
empathized, and then afterwards, I didn't even present the solution. I thought I had the A, B, and C answer, but I felt
Mhm.
like in that moment, God just stopped me. Said, just listen to him. He just needs you there right now. And, that brought healing, and that brought clarity to him, to them. And they were able to come up with a solution on their own. They were able to find peace on their own. And that was the Holy Spirit's role, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's simplistic, but it's not simple. It's something that you really have to be in tune with what this person's needs are, right? Especially if they're opening up, or if they're not opening up.
I
So,
like they're simplistic
hmm,
but not simple.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And today I feel like people are searching for more and more meaning, right? People talk about being spiritual and not religious.
Yeah.
So they're looking for all of these, and that's why a lot of new age is coming up now, because people are looking
Mhm.
for a lot of meaning outside of the religious institutions. Sometimes outside of the church, and anything innovative, anything new that they might not have heard of that might work, they're sometimes willing to try. Does your church or your ministry address this? And what are some strategies that you can employ reach and connect with these people seeking that might not necessarily, might not go to a conventional church or a Bible study per se? Are there different outreaches that you guys are doing, or different strategies that have been mentioned that may be employed in the future?
This is, forget where I heard it from. We had a speaker one time come in to our church and talk to all of the pastors, and they said, there's the church gathered and the church scattered. And the idea there was, many times you focus on gathering the church, gathering all the Christians. If you meet someone that you know is looking and wanting to know more about God, the idea is you invite them into the church. Gather.
Yeah.
But they said we need to actually be a church scattered, as in we have to see that we need to influence others outside the church. And something we've been really trying to encourage people. An example I tend to give is about cooking. So I don't know about the other people who are listening here who cook, but one time I put too much salt in a dish I was cooking. It was chicken adobo. People who know, but I put too much salt in. And it's like, what do you do? So I asked one of my other friends, they said, you put a potato in. Put a potato into the thing you cook, and it'll absorb all of the salt. And then it won't be that salty anymore. But at the end of it, the potato, you can't really eat it because it tastes terrible after.
It's too salty.
Yes, it absorbs all that salt, gets too salty. And sometimes I think that's what we tend to do as Christians. Is Jesus said we are salt, right? You are the salt of the earth. And sometimes we gather too much, like we make the church a potato, where we all gather up and we become too salty, and we're not actually spreading and helping to change our communities, because we're all just hanging together as a potato. And we need to not do that. So something our church has really been pushing is being witnesses, being people who engage with others in their workplace, where they are, in the malls. We're still encouraging people, because one of the hard things with being a leader, I think, is we want to do it all ourselves. But if you want to engage the community, you need to trust the other members of the church to do it. Because it can't all be the pastor. You have to trust them to do it. Now, some people are really good at it. Others are not. My dad was one of the people who was so good at doing this. So before, when he was alive, he passed away 7 years ago, he would go to the grocery. Imagine, supermarket. I went with him one time, and he knew the names of the people working in the supermarket. When we went to the cashier, he asked the cashier, "Oh, how's your son doing?" I said, "What happened?" And he's like, "Oh, the son is sick with a fever." And I'm like, "How do you know this? You know these things?" And like when we were crossing the street, there's like a guard like helping people cross the street. And then my dad gave the guard candy. He was like, "Oh yeah, because they need to be encouraged. That's so and so." And he knew the name of the guard. And I'm like, "How do you know all these people? How do you know these things?" And for my dad, it was second nature. I did not get that ability. I keep trying over the past 7 years, trying to live out his legacy, doing my best with it. But that's the example I always think of, is how we are supposed to be to help the people who are seeking to make sense of the world, like you said, outside of religion, is to show them that Jesus is a relation. We have a relationship with Jesus. He's not dead. He's alive. It's not a program, right? Like church isn't something you do on Sunday. But if we keep saying that church is not something you do on Sunday, church is not something you do in a building, we ourselves need to live it out and show other people that we bring Jesus where we go. So just like how we talk to people about like the Avengers, or like, "Oh, I saw this movie. It was such a great movie." You should be able to tell people, "Oh, I read this passage in the Bible. And it's so interesting," and just share it, because that's our life. And like, if we do it naturally, we're not going to get awkward about it. We just have to begin sharing it, that it's okay.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. I think that we do get in this box sometimes. And I've seen even, big churches, small churches as well, where sometimes the congregation on Sundays, they'll just kind of gather to each other, because that's where they're comfortable, right? So they'll go to the people that they know. They'll go to the people that they talk to week in, week out. And sometimes we forget that, hey, there's a new person there. And maybe they feel a little awkward in this moment, or maybe they don't really feel like they belong yet. And maybe they would have come back if, instead of just going in our little clique, we recognize that, hey, there's a new person here that, we can go and talk to, and that we can be with and spend time with in that moment. And I think that especially the older the church gets, I notice is that, and the longer the members are there, decade, 2 decades, they'll just naturally go to, oh, hey, how's it going? And go to the people that they're familiar with. And, to have that environment where you go in and you go, okay, who can I be the light to right now? Right? Who can I be the salt to right now? There's too much salt over there already, right? There's
Yeah.
6 familiar faces that we talk to every single Sunday for the past 7 years. That's way too salty.
Yeah.
But let's go over here, right? And let's add a little bit of salt and light over here. And I love how, as you were sharing that, I could do something similar with photography, where sometimes if in fact, you have too much light, then it can wash out the image. So for example, if I do a setting on here and I allow the sensor to absorb more and more light, what's going to happen ultimately is that I'm just going to disappear, right?
Right.
And I'm just not going to be seen at some point. And there's just too much light. And I guess, I'm not saying that we can ever have too much of God, but however, sometimes we forget that we just kind of congregate in ourselves. And there's that statistic, which I hope is not true, but it is, unfortunately. I think it's good that we're aware of it so that we can educate believers and followers of Jesus Christ, that as the longer someone's a Christian, the longer someone's a follower of Jesus Christ, the less friends they have that are non-Christians.
Yeah.
Right?
It's really the struggle, right?
Yeah. So you're so on fire in the beginning, and you have a lot of non-believer friends, so you're sharing to non-believers all the time, but then you're just more comfortable around believers, right? You're just more comfortable around people that follow Jesus Christ. You can relate to them more. You speak the same language. We all understand Christianese, and we all like the same things, and we all don't celebrate Halloween, and we all we all know the things that Christians know, and we kind of stick to that group. And when you talk about your father, there was a thought that went into my mind, and I remember one of our photographers coming in. So we've been doing photography. We've had a studio here nearly 10 years now. And, one of our photographers came in and they said, I just don't have that natural gift, to take photos. And one of the things I told him was, I've been taking photos for like 20 years. So I also I didn't have the natural gift. It came over time of doing it and taking photos and making mistakes and doing it again and making mistakes. And I think that you have that in you, right? If your father had that, you have that in you. And I see it. You are, I want to show this, where is it here? This photo of us, this is 10 years ago. And
Yeah.
You have this
I
way.
wanted to.
Yeah, we haven't aged.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that you've always been an encourager. And, I remember when we had these groups here, how encouraging, how people were just drawn to you because you just brought so much life into the room, Or are you here? Somewhere here.
There,
Is
I'm
that
in
you
the
right
back.
there? Yeah.
With my short hair.
Oh, yeah, that's really short there. And
Yeah.
you're such an encourager. And I think the
Thank you.
fact that your dad had that gift, right? I don't know what we were here, monkeys, tigers, something
Yeah.
fierce. But, your dad had it. You have it as well. You have it naturally also. But I think over time we hone in on that gift, right? And we sharpen it and sharpen it. So I see it in you. You might not, but you definitely have it because you come off very approachable. And sometimes we think we're not, and then we realize, oh, actually we are. People do want to talk to us, and we do have that. It just sometimes needs to get brought out, in certain circumstances. And so it's interesting hearing that story of your dad because I can actually see that in you. Yeah, moving forward, this is a digital age. We're talking digitally, right? And I'm very blessed that we're able to connect digitally. But how we communicate and connect can also be very different, right? We talked about COVID, you talked about COVID. So how has technology influenced ministry over there? And what lessons have you had in balancing, because sometimes we can I have this one men's group that we disciple, and I just realized that we've been having weekly Bible studies for about 5 months, and we have not yet met in person because they're on the other side of the city. And so I thought, guys, we got to meet. Let's actually physically meet. And I just realized, yeah, I've been meeting with them sparsely, like one-on-one, but we haven't come together as a group. But I've seen them. Some of them I've seen at church. Some of them I've seen at weddings. Some of them have come here at the house, but we haven't come together as one yet. And we were just talking about that in our last men's group. I thought, hey guys, let's actually get together. And so how do you find the balance between, digital, Zoom, to finally, okay, let's actually meet in person? Because Zoom can be so convenient, right? You're like, oh, I don't have to dress up,
Mm.
right? I can be in my pajamas and wear like a decent dress shirt or something, but nobody cares. I'm not wearing socks. You don't have to, prepare to go out. You don't have to commute. It's just boom, and then the meeting's done, and then you go back to what you're doing. So how do we
Right.
balance that in this day? What are your thoughts on that?
This the quiet and listening. I think one thing we have to do is, I think, okay, here we go. This is what we do, right? We share. I'm
Yeah,
still trying to figure this out. Like, there's that balance. It's not even a balance, but it's understanding how to keep your relationships with others from being stagnant. It's like I have a
yeah.
small group. And what happened is we were always meeting online on Zoom.
Mhm.
Then later we said, okay, let's try to meet up. Let's do this in person. Let's meet up. No one could make it. And then it's like, okay, let's
Okay.
just try again. And then after all, it's like, okay, we can't really even find a time on Zoom because we're so used to convenience and finding the right time. So you're like, okay, we can't find a time
Mm.
on Zoom. Let's just meet up once a month. We haven't met up yet. It's been like Robbie was born. So Robbie is already 3 years old. My son.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, we still haven't gotten there yet. I've got to meet up with some of them, like
Right.
one on one, or just like two, three of us. But
Mhm.
it went from, okay, we're too dependent on Zoom, to like, let's just try to meet up. Okay, let's just not do Zoom, so we'll be forced to meet up, and now we just don't
Right.
meet up.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's like I just keep thinking of that. Like, it's so hard to even find a balance because when you
Mm.
can't even be intentional anymore. So I think
Mhm.
what we have to do is maybe just keep trying. Maybe
Mhm.
that might be the solution to this. Is you try to meet up digitally, you try to meet up physically, but the point
Mhm.
should be you keep on trying to try to meet up with others and be intentional about it. I really think that's what happened. Also, is after Zoom got so normal, it became you
Mhm.
only message people to meet up like this for with intention. It's like, okay, we have to meet up. We're going to do Bible study. We have to meet up because we're going to talk about this. It's rare to be like, hey, let's just
Hang
talk.
out.
Yeah, those of
Yeah.
us who are older who remember what a phone was. That you guys
Yeah.
up to just talk to them. So it's like you get a random call, you pick it up. Oh,
Yes.
now even social media, I'm having a hard time adjusting to the way how young adults and high school students, college students, how they use social media. It's become so much. You leave a message. It's becoming more like voicemail. I find where it's like,
Yes.
hey, just want to shoot this to you and let you know this is what I need to talk to you about, and then done. And then later on, you reply to me at your convenience, rather than like, let's just chat and talk to each other back and forth. Like, we
Mhm.
don't do that
Mhm.
anymore. And I think that's so. It might not be with technology in terms of the technology is hurting communication, but teaching us how do we communicate intentionally with one another. So it might
Mhm.
be messaging them and saying, hey, let's meet up on Zoom because we can't meet up in person, but let's be intentional about it. I mean, like, for example, the
Mhm.
two of us, right? I realized that after the last two times we met, it's like how I really realized how much I look forward to these conversations because I don't get to just sit and talk to someone like this. Because since we're talking on the phone or we're talking on a camera, I can't be looking at other stuff on my phone. I can't be thinking about other stuff. So when we're talking, we're just talking. And since we know the
Mhm.
next time we'll talk will be like a month from now, we really open up about everything. And there's the side is
Yeah.
like, I need to make this conversation count.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not
Yeah.
exactly a different perspective on it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's very true, right? It's almost as if you're right. Like our messages to one another are like voicemails, right? A lot of
For
times.
those old
And
enough to remember even voicemails.
yes, yes. And I noticed that also with especially the younger generation. I know they'll call it like ghosting, but I get ghosted way more from the younger generations than, let's say, our generation, the older generation, where if they read a message, normally, okay, I read the message, I'm going to reply right now. But a lot of times you'll see that red mark on Messenger or red mark on, iPhone or whatever, Android,
Yeah.
but then there'll be no reply. It's like, okay, I read it and I'm just way too busy right now to get back to you. So, or I'm just caught up at whatever, caught me at the wrong time. Maybe I read it. And that's happened with me where I've read something that, okay, I'm going to reply in a minute after I finish this thing. And then I don't end up replying, for a few days. I'm like, oh, I didn't never ended up replying there. And that's that's new, isn't it? Because we never had the ability to do that before. Because if somebody called you, and also before, we never had, I mean, caller ID, you had to pray, pray, but pay for caller ID before. And so you didn't
Right.
even know who was calling. You would kind of just answer it like, oh, hey, yeah, oh, yeah, I'm just cooking right now. Yeah, so what are we doing? Or, oh, yeah, did you watch that show? And we kind of catch up in that sense. And there was always this connection throughout the day, right? You're always connecting throughout the day. And now it's more, okay, what do I need to get done? Everybody is so, what do we need to do focus these days? I feel like this generation is more on a, just get it done, like kind of the hustle and bustle generation.
Mhm.
I don't know if you're aware of like Gary Vaynerchuk, who's just like work, 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 right? And
Yeah.
and I think that sometimes even ministry becomes like that, where we forget to just sit and chat and bear our hearts out to one another and share, because there's the next thing that we need to do, because we have a list of to-do list that really never ends, right? And to be able to sit down and there's so much healing in that, to be able to talk about things. And I think that's why there is an epidemic of loneliness in the West,
Yeah.
probably all over the world, that
Yeah.
now more and more psychologists and psychiatrists are saying people are depressed, people are feeling disconnected, people are feeling lonely, despite being in a day and age where we are connected to more people than ever. Like, people have hundreds of friends on Facebook, right? But
Right.
not hundreds of real connections. And I think that's where, a community comes in and the church comes in and can fill in that void, right? Where that void of fellowship, that void of really connecting, that void of really, does anybody really care about me? And
Yeah.
there's a lot of people out there who have a lot of people around them but just feel alone. And I think that may be one of the things, is that everybody's just leaving text voicemails to each other, whether
Yeah.
it's email or on Messenger. And whenever we're on the phone, there's we can't really focus because there's that next thing to do, or that next meeting, or that next thing to post, or that deadline. And to be able to sit down and go, okay, I need this for myself, and to be okay with that, right? To
Mhm.
recognize that, because I think the generation before us might not have realized that. And a lot of pastors burned out, a lot of ministers burned out. And you actually sent me a message, hey, you need your rest too. That's a good
Yeah.
reminder to just go, hey, I need my rest too. And after you sent me that message, I got in, and you know what I did? So I'm preaching on Ephesians 6 Sunday, and so what I decided was, you know what,
That's,
right in that wrong one verse, but
yeah.
that is really cool. That is really cool.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know what, I'm going to rest right now, and I'm going to rest on the word right now. And so I grabbed one of my study Bibles, and I just read the entire book of Ephesians with the commentary on that, and that's particular study Bible. It's an apologetic study Bible. And I really found rest in that moment, just going through those 6 chapters in Ephesians. And because I know that, okay, I'm preaching on 6:18, but like, what is everything? What is this whole book about? And just to read through that and rest in that really allowed me to sit and be still in that moment, in a day and age where all the externals are pushing you to go and do something. To be able to just be still and know that he is God, be still and spend time with God, be still and spend time with a brother, and share and
Mhm.
be open, and really just be honest with yourself, be honest with one another, be honest with God. I think is so important in this day and age, when everybody's projecting something,
Mhm.
and internally we don't know what's happening, right? It's like an iceberg. There's so much underneath. And there's
Yeah.
this thing that just happened with, I don't know if you heard about it, I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about it, but there's this mega, mega, mega church in the US that just is coming under scrutiny right now.
Mhm.
And they're talking about how this has been happening for years and years and years, although nothing is finalized yet. But it just reminded me that, wow, there's so much happening on the internal that is
Mhm.
not being dealt with, that it's showing up secretly and then eventually being brought to the light.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that in Christendom, right? Especially now that we have access to so many different ministries, and we're able to see what everybody's doing all over the world, and we're also able to see the downfalls and the mistakes, and unfortunately it hurts the church. And how we can deal with that is just really dealing with what's happening inside of us, right? So that we don't become that
Yeah.
next story, that next number,
Yeah. I was
um
thinking of
no.
again being intentional with people, of how it's hard at first doing that, and then later on you get used to it. It's like for me growing up, I was used to bringing work home, and then when I
Mm,
got married, my wife was like, "When you're home, don't bring work home. You leave work at work."
mm,
And it took me a long time, but after a while, I was able to really put those boundaries and say, "Work is work. I'm
right.
now at home. Time with family." And the other one my wife said before
Mm,
was, when we have kids, we want them to not be on phones when we're eating.
okay.
So even before
Mm,
we had kids, we had a rule of no phones while we eat. And now, like,
ah,
I just don't use my phone when we eat. Like, it's already ingrained in me. But I was
right,
thinking like
right.
that when we minister to others,
Mm,
sometimes as church leaders, we think about like, oh, I have to do this ministry later. Oh, I have to do this later. And then, like, why am I doing this? We're just talking. Like, it's
yeah,
a waste of time. But in reality, that is ministry. That is
right.
what God called you to do, to hear this person and be with them, rather than
Mm,
think of like, oh, there's something bigger that has to be done. You think
right.
of Jesus in the Bible. If Jesus had the same work ethic as a lot of us, he'd do nonstop healing and teaching and like that, and doing thousands of
Yeah.
people, stadiums everywhere. And yet Jesus like went to the woman at the well, one
Mm,
girl,
one,
took a whole detour into Samaria for him to
yeah,
reach this one woman and help her to know God. And it's like some of us today, we would say that was a waste of time. Why did you waste all that time on one person? Compared to,
ah,
from God's perspective, just that one is enough.
yes. Wow. Yes. You're right. That's so true. That is so true. I that just reminds me of, I've been compelled. There's this same person that I see every single day, and every single day I see them. I haven't said anything to them, or I haven't said hi to them or anything like that. I drive past by this crosswalk every day, and there's a person there that controls the crosswalk and allows the pedestrians to come through because there's a school there. And every time I see this person, I think I want to just pull over and just tell them, hey, you want some pizza or something? Or hey, how's it going? And just say hi. But I never do, because I always think, well, I got to get home, and I got to do this and do that. But there's this nudge every single time. There's this nudge to just say, hey, why don't you? And we're going to have a party this Saturday because my birthday's coming up. And so I thought, okay, we're going to have a Bible party, and we're going to do photo shoots for some of our friends. And then we're going to share, do a Bible study and just have a Bible party and call it my birthday. And I just thought, you know what? Next time I see that person, I'm just going to drop them some food and be like, hey, by the way, we're having a party. So yeah, that's one of the things that just spoke to me very clearly, because there's this nudge to go, but then there's this other voice saying, no, there's too many things to do. There's too many things to get done. And, that reminds me of the detour that you took, right? This was a detour that you took. All of these actually were detours coming out here to encourage us. And meeting this time here was a detour. And, you
Yeah.
know, this is a memory that we'll always have and we'll always cherish, and something that I cherish. And that is ministry. You're right. That is showing up for people. And that's what Jesus would do, right? We think sometimes we're thinking about numbers. How many people am I impacting, instead of how deep am I impacting this person?
Great.
And that's a great perspective to have moving forward, as a reminder for leaders, right? Because you just focus on that one person, whoever in that moment is in need in that moment, and they'll be rejoicing in heaven, right?
Yeah.
So I know that it's been about 57 minutes now. So I want to wrap up,
Yeah.
but it's such a privilege, and so thank you for coming on here. I do want to ask, one last question. Before I go into that last question, though, I want to do an intro to the last question, which is, what are some projects, events that you're working on that you'd like, to share with others? Or how can people connect with you if they have any questions, anything that you're part of that you want to share?
I don't know. I guess if people want to connect with me, I'm on Messenger. I'm on
Mm-hmm.
Facebook. KP Mark Del
Okay, yeah.
Rosario. KP
And you'll be
is Kuya Pastor.
Mhm.
Besides KP Mark, it's easy to find because there's a bunch of Mark Del Rosarios. That's why I use KP.
Yeah.
KP
Yeah, yeah.
means Kuya Pastor. Kuya is
Mhm.
the word we use in Philippines for big brother. So
Mhm.
I'm big. What I always tell people is Kuya Pastor because I'm supposed to be a big brother first to
Yes.
people over being a pastor. Going back to what I shared that my discipler told me in college that it's not a job being a
Mhm.
pastor. So if people call me Kuya Pastor, in other words, like, oh, you're a big brother to me, it reminds me, remember, you're that first. We're the family of God. You're an older brother first.
Mhm.
So don't always put on the pastor cap and be like, okay, time to preach, time to do a theology or doctrines with this person right away. But like, just be
Mhm.
there for them. Yeah, I'm on Messenger if anyone wants to message me there. On YouTube, my burden of wanting to do a YouTube channel, which hasn't happened. It's been stagnant for 2 years already. Everyday Christian. You just have to look for me. God willing, pray for me. God willing, I can be able to start that up again because a lot of the students are
Yes.
actually asking me, saying, KP Mark, you have a YouTube. Oh, we want to watch, we want to hear what you have to say about certain things. And when I use, right, I give examples on movies or like that, right? All the different Funko Pops and stuff. They want to hear these things. And I keep saying,
Mm.
yes, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. I never get around to it. So hopefully, Everyday Christian on YouTube, just look for the one with my face because I think there's other everyday Christians there. Pray that that
Okay.
starts up again. That'd be great if they can look it up. I do have a bunch of videos there, but it's been stagnant for about almost 2 years. Yeah, hopefully I can
Okay.
start that up again. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I think you should. And so what we're going to do with this podcast is we're actually going to take it and then we're going to cut a bunch of shorts out of it. So I'm going to Dropbox this and I'm going to send it to you. So you have access to that. So you'll automatically have stuff that's edited. It's going to have captions on
Nice.
it and stuff. And you can post it onto your YouTube anytime.
That would be great. So I don't need to
Yeah, I
get.
want to hear some of those as well, right? So yeah, you definitely have to do those. So okay, so the last question, that was just the intro to the last question. And
Yeah.
last question is, if there's three pieces of advice that you could give to that 21-year-old self, right, way back in New York City, what would those back in time and talk to that younger, not yet KP Mark, right?
Yeah.
Just that Mark, not yet a
Yeah.
pastor, not yet a minister for these 15 years. What three pieces of advice would you give your younger self?
Number one, I think something I'd really give to myself as advice is ministry
Mm,
is not only from the pulpit. Because oftentimes we think as pastors and church leaders, like when you're on the pulpit or in other words, you're speaking front, like that's when you're doing ministry and that's when you're most effective. And even now, right, like that's something we always think about. Like I said, during
mm,
lockdown, it's like, what am I doing? But I think it's something to always be reminded of is ministry happens outside of that. I mean,
mm,
teaching is when we teach, but actually helping people know who God is happens when they see who God is in you as a person, not as that person on the stage, but as the person who's having coffee with them, who's talking to them in the mall. Like that's what they need to see. And then,
yeah.
yeah, it's not only that. Ministry is really beyond the pulpit. It's really there when you're with people in everyday life. The second thing I think is, let me see what else. The importance of loving others. I like how we have to remember how God loves us. And when we
Mm,
say that, we take that for granted so often. Like, oh yeah, God loves us. Oh, love like Jesus. And we think that's so
mm,
easy. But so often we just kind of get this concept of love like Jesus and we just do it rather than really look at the Bible and see this is how Jesus loved. How
mm,
can I do this with others? And also
mm,
realizing that as we love others, we need to use those relationships to lead other people to Christ. This worry I have of thinking that we'll let the world know who God is through the ministry we do. When
mm.
really Jesus said, by this all men will know that you're my disciples if you have love for one
Love one
another.
another.
And so often we get
Yeah.
focused on the wrong things. I think as church leaders, as active volunteers in church, as mature Christians, sometimes we focus on the wrong things. I think that's how the world will know we're Christians, rather than saying, no, the world will know who we are by how we love each other. So the
Yes.
importance of loving others is really there. So ministry is not only from the pulpit, It's really important to love other people. And then number three is rest. I think that's the other one. You need to rest.
That's
I'm
good.
someone who struggles with working too much. Um,
You and I both.
yeah, like I like to say I'm an introvert. People don't believe me, but I tell them I can sit and work on a sermon all day for like a week and not
Yeah.
interact with anyone. And I'm not craving hanging out with people, but I know I need to. I need
Yes.
rest. Rest doesn't necessarily always mean sleep. Rest
Hmm.
can be you
Hmm.
go and you spend time with people. Rest
Yeah.
can mean you go and you watch a movie and take a break.
Yeah.
The reason I also say rest is there's this one pastor's retreat we went on. Wonderful
Mm.
pastor's retreat. So first session, we saw their plenary, 2 hours. So we get to the plenary. And they're
Yeah.
like, okay, what we want you to do is go and spend time talking to God for 2 hours. Come back here and be ready to share. So we go off 2 hours. We're like,
Yeah.
all the pastors reading the Bible, we're journaling and all that stuff. We
Mm.
come back and
Mm.
then the speaker says, okay, if you look on our schedule, 2 hours of sharing time. He said, I want you to go back and spend another 2 hours with God. Because I know all of your pastors, you used the first 2 hours to make a Bible study. I want you to go rest with God. And then he said, if you want to take a nap, you can. But when you nap and lie down, you pray and you thank God. Worship Him that you can sleep, that you have an opportunity to rest. Thank God that you have a bed. And if you're going to go talk to others, you can. But stop setting yourself to Bible study mode and stop thinking that you have to work when you're told to rest. So he said,
Mm.
rest is rest. Just like if you want to read the Bible, don't be picking it apart. Just read it. If you want
Mm.
to talk to people, just do that. Like you need to rest and enjoy what God has given you. Stop
Mm.
focusing on productivity. Stop following
Yeah.
that idol of productivity. We need to focus on
Hmm.
resting and enjoying what God gave. That's why we have a Sabbath, right? It's like so we
Hmm.
can put our trust in God, rest in Him, enjoy who He is. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think those are three.
That is so, that one of those things is my presence will go with you and I will give you rest, right? What God said to Moses. And I think that we also, I'm a type A where I can just spend time in study all day like you, or I can just dig
Yeah,
into the Bible. I can read all the commentaries I need to read, and then I'll go to the next book and I'll read up the history of it, and I just dig into it. And it's so, I mean, I could do that all day. And then, it's when I run into people now, when everything I've read is tested and I fail. And I'm like, I just read all of that. And,
yeah,
I think, yeah, the process of spending time with God and then immediately applying it, immediately being tested on, okay, did we really learn it? Is it just head knowledge, or did it affect us? And did it affect
right.
us with others? And it kind of ties back all the way into this, right? Where if we rest and we're in that state of rest, we can really love others better, right? It's when we're not under, it's when we're not rested, when we make decisions that are poor, or when we act not out of love, and when we think, oh, well, this is more important because I'm going to be preaching soon, as opposed to, hey, this moment is a moment for God. This moment is a moment to give time to someone and to actually display Christ-like characteristics, and to really work on the fruit of the Spirit, work on my patience, on my love, on my self-control, and to go into Martha mode. I got to do this. I got to take
Yeah,
care of this. I got to do this, and just truly sit at the feet and listen and spend time with Him. And so this has been a treat, just being able to sit down here with you and spend time with you and to hear your thoughts on all of these subjects. I know we didn't get through all the questions, but we'll have many more meetings, I'm sure, in the
yeah.
future. This has been so insightful. There's Pastor Ray Waltika saying nice. This is classic Facebook comment there. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's been a privilege, and our friendship over the years. I just want to thank you for that. You're someone you are a Barnabas. You are a
Thank
Barnabas, and you are a Nehemiah, a modern day Nehemiah and Barnabas. Definitely to me, and I'm sure to all those kids who are visiting you there, and young adults and seniors who you're ministering kind of across the board. And I think that's a gift that you have, that God has developed in you over the years, just to be able to minister to a broad spectrum of people. we have an amen here. Thank you very much. Advance happy birthday for Friday. Yeah, I have the same birthday as his brother, Nimrod Tika. We have the exact same birthday. And then there's a lead pastor here, Pastor Jerry Behringer he's the lead pastor at Champion Life Center. He's also November 3. And then my pastor at JFA, so the senior pastor at JFA, his wife is November 3 as well. So a lot of people celebrating on that day.
That's great.
But yeah, thanks so much for your time. I know you're busy. I know you got an 11 a.m. over there. Thank you so much. Also, Green Hills Christian Fellowship, Christian School for this time. Yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch with Green Hills Christian School, private Christian school over there, we'll link the address down below, and to Pastor Mark and GCF as well. So thank you again for everything. God bless you and your ministry over there. I pray that he would continue to expand the borders there at GCF and raise up future leaders through you. And may you continue to be an encourager over there as you've always been. So thanks so much, Pastor Mark. And
thank you also.
Yeah, God bless everybody. Thank you for joining us. And we will see you again next time. This is Vince Revo and Mark Del Rosario here at Revolutionary Leaders, Man After God, signing off, wishing you well. God bless. And remember, keep Jesus first. Bye for now.